Hi there. Hope you're doing really, really well. Uh, we have 3 emails and 1 comment to go over today. And before we start, nothing here is personal or medical advice to anyone, just general thoughts and comments I hope will help anyone that's tuning in. With that said, let us jump in here and look at a question from Nikita. Dear Daniel, for the last week, I was sleeping poorly, just 2-3 hours per night. And last night, I didn't sleep at all. My whole body was shaking due to panic. Can this complete sleeplessness go on and on? Could I die from it? This creates so much anxiety for me. Thanks so much for what you do. First of all, Nikita, thank you for sending me this question. Really, really helpful to have questions to talk about, particularly questions like this one, which are common. A lot of people have the same worry and concern. So here's the thing. No, you cannot die from insomnia or short sleep or not sleeping enough. You cannot lose your mind because you're not sleeping enough. You cannot lose the ability to sleep because of insomnia. But these are very common questions. And from the kind of inside perspective, when you're starting to have trouble sleeping, it can seem like really bizarre. Like, what's going on? I can't sleep. I'm just not getting any sleep at all, and it's getting worse, and etc. And you can get these thoughts of like, what if this just keeps going on? What if I don't sleep at all? What if I lose the ability to sleep, etc. But that cannot happen. The worst thing that can happen is that you feel really, really tired and foggy and things like that. And it can cause anxiety, of course, too. But no, you cannot. Catastrophic events like that cannot happen. And another thing is, for anyone out there that has had trouble sleeping for a week or 2 weeks or like a shorter period of time like that, the best thing to do really is nothing. Not do anything at all is the best, just not react to it and not try to figure it out, not to change your behavior in any way. Because what's happening when we have like a sleepless night or two and we start becoming worried about it is that this kind of threat detector in our brain goes off. It locks down on like sleeplessness and says like, whoa, you are not sleeping. This is a health threat. This is a threat to you. You got to do something about it. And then the problem with that becomes the things we do then is like trying to go to bed earlier, trying to sleep in, trying to make it dark. That none of that helps, and then you sleep even less. Then your threat detector becomes like, oh, really like focused on this, and then things just get worse and worse. And for somebody that has more like chronic insomnia, then it no longer is sufficient to just say, don't do anything. Because you often created so many kind of beliefs and preoccupations and worries that you kind of have to have a more structured plan to undo, all the kind of beliefs and thought processes and things that have developed over time. But if you only had trouble sleeping for a week or 2 weeks, then it works great. Just do nothing. So Nikita, hope this helps. And with that said, let's move on to another email, which was from Vincent. Vincent, one day ago, said the following: Daniel, I finally was able to sleep 1 to 2 hours because of my sleep drive. I've tried hard not to take a nap, which is very difficult during the day. But this is why sometimes in the night at 10:30 or 11:30 p.m., I feel a strong sleep drive. But if I wait until midnight or 1 a.m., the sleep drive is like going away, which now cannot make me sleep. What do you think? Why is this happening? This is a great question. It is a classic insomnia question. And before we talk more about that, I just want to point something out that, people may think you're kind of nitpicking here. This is just semantics, but I believe this is important. First sentence here is, Daniel, I finally was able to sleep. When somebody says, I was able to sleep, that indicates that that person has kind of a belief that sleep is an ability, that and in this very second, as I'm talking here, I realized that in Tagalog, I think in Filipino, it's a little different. I remember people telling me I was able to do this when I would have said I did that. So anyway, it may not actually apply to you, Vince, here, but generally speaking, when we think of sleep as like an ability, like I'm able to sleep, or I managed to sleep, or I was successful in getting to sleep, or I couldn't sleep, etc., it's not helpful, because what happens is the more we kind of try to sleep, the more we want to sleep, the more we think of it as something we can do proactively, the less we get. Sleep is tricky. The more you want it, the less you get. The less you want it, the more you get, which then segues very nicely into this classic question about why is it that before I go to bed, I feel a little sleepy. I feel it. And then as soon as I go to bed, I feel wide awake. It's because of that. When you're not trying to sleep, when you're in fact maybe even trying to stay awake, sleep comes easy. But when we're trying to sleep or wanting to sleep or kind of hoping to sleep, that creates this hyperarousal. It's monitoring, in our brain, like, are we going to sleep? What's going to happen? I hope I sleep. What if I don't? Et cetera, et cetera. That can really keep sleep from happening. So that explains this very common phenomenon. Now, on a more practical note, what should one do if this is happening? Well, I say the same thing that anybody with more chronic trouble sleeping should do, meaning spend less time in bed, get up early, get up the same time every day, stay active and busy, try to do things that are enjoyable, that distract you from any thoughts about sleep, and just keep going. With time, as you spend less time in bed, you will find that you start kind of falling asleep sooner than you thought, falling back asleep sooner than you thought. And that more than anything else takes away like sleep worries, preoccupation, and starts building sleep confidence. So I think actually, the fact that you, Vince, here said you describe it as a positive, it's like 1 to 2 hours, is very encouraging. Like the first kind of positive sign often is actually the first positive sign when you're helping somebody. In my experience is usually that somebody is like, I'm a little bit less worried, but may not be sleeping anymore or better. And then the second kind of step is like noticing a little more sleep. It's very encouraging. So Vince, keep working. I know you're working with Martin Reed, and I think something that I often say is that out of all the people that I've taken care of as patients or clients or not, every single person that kind of that doesn't give up, that kind of keeps asking me questions, that kind of is willing to work, etc., does better. So for anyone out there, just keep going and you will do it. You will do better. Now, before we answer an email here, let's go over to a comment from COC Master. It's a comment on episode pod 67, where COC Master says, thanks, Dan, for replying. My eye problem is fine now. I sleep good when I don't think much about sleep. But I just think, what if I will not be able to sleep even if I don't have any anxiety? That sometimes makes me afraid. What if I will not be able to sleep even after being happy and non-anxious? I just realized as I was reading this, that same thing here. We often talk about sleep as like, what if I'm not able to sleep? And again, I might be like nitpicking here, but I think it's important to again point out that sleep is not an ability. It's when we are trying to sleep that we can't. It's when we don't try at all, that sleep kind of comes to us. And I realized that I just said, it's when we don't try that we can sleep. I shouldn't have said that. It's like, again, it's so hard not to talk about sleep as an ability or a skill. I should have said, it's when we're not trying to sleep, sleep comes easy. When we're trying to sleep, sleep doesn't happen to us, something like that. But anyway, firstly, here I want to say I'm super happy this kind of watery eye thing is good. Super happy that you're sleeping well, now that you're not thinking much about sleep. And then, what if becomes the question, what if I'm just happy, I'm not anxious, and I'm not sleeping much at all? Well, the what if is like such a common thing that causes insomnia. And by the way, I think anxiety, panic, worries, all of that is kind of driven by the what if. And I'm just mentioning that because I think always it's good to kind of understand a little bit of the process when it comes to insomnia and other things like anxiety too, like this. It's the ambiguity. It's not so much that oftentimes it's not like one is worried about a specific thing. It's just like not knowing what that thing is, or not knowing why one is worried. Kind of the ambiguity is often the problem. And just as a general thing that now I'm kind of moving in a different direction here, but I very recently learned something that I'm planning to do a specific episode on, which was Michael Schwartz, my friend and colleague. He told me this thing about how studies have shown that if somebody has like a lesion in their skin, like a spot, and they get really worried about that, their anxiety levels can go like sky high, because they're like, what is this? What is this thing on my skin? What if it's this? What if it's that? What if it's cancer, which is like the worst thing it could be, right? Well, if these patients are told that, yes, you in fact have melanoma, this is skin cancer, which is the worst possible thing it could be, guess what happens to anxiety levels? They go down, because an unknown has now become a known, you know? And how can this help? Well, for somebody with like general anxiety or sleep-related anxiety, any anxiety, if one can make it a little bit more known, taking it from the unknown to the known, that can really help. So specifically how to do that is really journaling, like writing down what you're worried about and something you could do about it. Just like getting things down on paper and like getting it more dialed in, if you will, understanding what it is that's happening in your brain can really help. But that said, on a maybe more practical note here, I've never come across anybody who's just like happy, busy during the day, not spending an excessive amount of time in bed, and not anxious that has trouble sleeping. There are definitely people who describe that they're like, I'm not worried, I'm not stressed, but I just don't sleep. I find that those people really have hyperarousal. It's not like it's an anxiety that is kind of hidden, if you will. You don't feel it, but it's there. And the mere fact that somebody is asking me questions about like, why is it I can't sleep? That in itself tells me that there is some worry, there is some thoughts and preoccupation about it that is actually driving. So anyway, COC Master, hope you sleep well always. And I know easier said than done, but the best thing to do with sleep is just like try not to think about it all. And the way you do that, I believe, is to just be happy, go about your day, and do things you enjoy, you know? All right. So this said, let us move to another last question here, which is from Alex. A little bit of background here. Alex, I think, connected with me like back in February and described this, what sounded like hypnic jerks, which is when you're about to fall asleep, you kind of have this jerky motion, sometimes preceded by this like feeling of like falling and then jerking, you know? And he described this as a reflex. And then he actually had very little of those, but sent me an email about 3 days ago, and that I replied to recently. And then there was this kind of follow-up question here that I want to read. Where is it? Why can I not find it right now? Let me see. Let me go back to my inbox, and here it is. And let's open all these messages. And here it is, one day ago. Good evening, Dr. Erickson. Thank you so much for your video podcast, and I am very glad to see that it brings you as much joy as it brought me. That is absolutely true. I love every single question I get that brings life to this channel. So super, super grateful. Now, thanks for asking my 2 questions. I seriously can't tell you how much that made my night. In regards to your answer for my first question, I was a little bit confused by a portion of your answer that I would absolutely love if you could clarify for me. In the video at the 14 minutes, 18-second mark, you mentioned that you've heard the same thing from many people, and that what you came to believe and what you shared was the best thing to do. And what is that, by the way? So I've heard from many people that have these kind of hypnic jerk type events happen. And I believe they are kind of a micro version of insomnia, meaning they can happen for no particular reason, often actually. But when people have them more frequently, repetitively, I believe they're driven by hyperarousal, which is when your brain is in this kind of like alert state, hyper alert state, like a little bit anxious state. And they are, I like to use this analogy of like sprinters. You imagine like it's the Olympics, 100-meter dash, like these people are lined up at the start blocks, and sometimes somebody just darts away, and there's for no particular reason, right? And or it's kind of somebody sneezes and somebody darts away. It's because when the brain is in this kind of like hyper alert, hyper vigilant state, it can easily be triggered. So I really feel that when you have, like, let's say you have some hypnic jerks, and then you become worried about them, you think about them, you become hyper aroused, well, guess what? You have more of them. So the way to reverse that, I believe, is to try not to figure them out, try not to think about why they're happening, try not to monitor them, try not to do anything to prevent them, try not to read up on it and things like that. Try not to give them attention. I believe that the less attention they get, the less of them you will have. The more attention they get, the more hyperarousal, the more preoccupation, the more of them you will have. So that's kind of what I shared with Alex. Now, my question based on your answer in the video is, did you tell me my strategy, which was kind of not paying attention to them, for dealing with this reflex was right based on what you have heard from other people who went through the same thing that I did? Or did you tell me my strategy was the best way of dealing with the reflex because of your knowledge of sleep and sleep processes? So I want to say this, that it's mostly number two. I've heard the question that Alex had about these reflexes or hypnic jerks many times. I haven't heard so much follow-up, but I will say that in my video on hypnic jerks, there was somebody named Global Watch who commented that he or she had them very, very often, and then a couple of months later, not at all, completely gone away. And I'm not sure that was because of, trying kind of what I always say, kind of to ignore them, or not. But my point here is that I don't have follow-up from too many people. So mostly this, what I think is the best thing to do is that belief is based on my understanding of sleep and insomnia and hyperarousal. Yeah, so I think there's one other person who had a lot of these that and it got better, but I can't really even remember her name. But it was on this channel. So yeah, it's mostly for the second reason there. That said, we have answered those questions today. Anybody else out there with any question or comment, please leave a comment or email me, daniel@insomniainsight.co. And I look forward to having you back here really soon. I will be back with more tomorrow.